Okay, shall we start? After that lunch, the blood's down here, so why don't you stand up?
Oh yeah.
This is the watered down version of Tai Chi. So if you've got a back problem or something, just stay seated. But if you're okay, then follow me. Okay. So little circle. Okay, yeah. Don't knock the person over. Stand next to it. And then gradually welcome. A little bigger. Loosen up. Nice breathing in as you're doing it. And then little circles with the right leg and foot. Okay. And again, if you need to hold on to something, go ahead and do so. And switch with the left leg and foot. Okay. Welcome, Stephanie. And then, again, watch your back. Touch the ground. Touch the sky. Touch the flowers. Touch the moon. Touch the animals. It has a special meaning today after our presentation, right? Touch the ground. Touch the sky. Touch the flowers. Touch the grass. Touch the animals. Touch the moon. Inhale. Again. And then this last one, do it in the form of a heart. And then all together, we love triparts. Stephanie, you're happy. Oh, there's. Oh, okay. So, what we'll do, if you'll just look on page 2 after the spider web, just to kind of give you a map in your brain, the introduction, welcome and exercise. Check that one out. Okay. And then I'm going to, I was never into drugs into college, but I admit as a teacher, I'm a dope peddler. Okay? Because I'm going to give you a dopamine eliciting quiz. Okay? We'll get the dopamine neurotransmitters surging. Okay? And then I kind of want to run into just a tiny little mini lesson, okay, in which we'll use Stephanie and Laura as our examples. Okay? And then from that, I want you to leave today, if at all possible, with 2 or 3 activities that we can do together. Because I was just at T-Sol, and I thought, the ones where we did the activities, I'm going to go home and do, and the ones that we just talked about, I'll just think about. So I want to run through as many of those. And then the Q&A I've got at the end, but seriously, if you've got a question at any point in time, just raise, and we'll answer it right away. Okay? Good? All right. So if you'll move to the gentleman that just came in. Oh, and by the way, I had my wife go to Aldi's before this, and she very nicely got not the American but the German chocolate. So anyone who does well today will go out with a little extra. All right. So let me just give you a couple minutes. Does everybody have a pair that you can work with, or 2 or 3? Okay. Just go through the true and false rule. I'll give you about 2 minutes. You want to go through it? Yeah.
For number 8.
Good. We're almost done. Almost. Okay. 1 second. Okay. Ta-da! The opening of the bag. Oh, do a trial? Oh, like when you go to the bar and say, well, can I have 13 tastes of your beer? Maybe, if there's one. That's a good question, actually. You need somebody to prime the pump, right? So, there are over 200 triparts in English. True, yeah. Probably, ones that I was amazed. I was just telling my friends at lunch that last night I picked up a book on nursery rhymes, written by a British gentleman. I just picked it up and I was waiting for my wife and daughter to pick me up. I'm reading through it. Right on the first page were 3 triparts. And then today, Larry used one in the introduction to Miss Asher, right? And then she used a lot of them, right? She had to go and read up on those things and tie it in with and use them all over. Okay. So not all languages have phrasal verbs. Who said that? But yeah, I mean, like French, for example, you just use the basic verb, right? Most of the time. Spanish, I mean, there are some exceptions, but in general, there's just a lot of verbs for that, right? German, I mean, German-based languages have it. I asked my wife Turkish, she said they don't have it in Turkish, it's mainly just, the single word verbs. So that's what makes it difficult for our students, because you get so many that, are trying to wrap their minds around it. And then there was that study done, 2 different studies, one done with Dutch students and one done with Israeli students, and they taught them all these triparts and bipart phrasal verbs. They mastered them more or less, but at the end of the semester they gave them the exam, and they all reverted back to the single word verbs because they felt comfortable with it and they didn't want to take that risk involved. But all right, university or college professors seldom use triparts in their lectures. Oh. Yes. No, why aren't you guys directors? I remember I rode the tram last year at Oregon TESOL with these 2 ladies that were teaching out in Pennsylvania, and I said, do you guys use idioms, and do you have lessons in idioms and phrasal verbs? And they said, no, our director thinks that they're useless because they won't be using them at the university. Okay. So, the use of run out of is the same in the following. Oh. Okay. And that's one that, when I teach run out of, the students always want to do run out of the store and run out of the class. They don't actually do it. Using triparts is sometimes more natural sounding and less contrived than using single word verbs. Sure. Yeah. I mean, how often would you say, you ask your students, I would like you to produce or make or invent something and it's supposed to come up with. The tripart reach out to has only one meaning. Okay. Which is very ambiguous, because if we say that Ashley reached out to her friend, it could mean that she either helped or asked for help. There are 3 grammatical categories for triparts. I think, like, you could look at, well, like, come up with, I like to call that a genuine tripart, because, hey, because anytime you always need that, like cat, right? CAT, you can't do anything with it. But then the other one, that's the flexible one, brush up on, again, if you're writing it, you need those 3, but if you're talking, like let's say that Mark asked me, it's a good thing I studied for that. I said, oh, you brushed up? He said, yeah. And then Judith comes in and said, brushed up on what? Right? So only if you know the context of the situation, you kind of take that off, but it's still a tripart. And then talk somebody out of. Okay. So then there's the mandatory separation. So those are the, I mean, if you come up with more, email me and let me know. But these are the 3 that of those 200 that I've worked with, where there's that pattern. These are the separations, the one that you can take off at the end, the preposition or adverb in some cases, or the genuine one. Okay. So, using, now this one is my favorite. Using triparts will significantly increase the EL's likelihood of getting a date with a native speaker of English.
Show me those results.
I said it depends on how cute the person.
Oh, nice answer. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, anytime that I mean, that's the big thing why I like to use, in addition to their English knowledge, is I always tell them, and it's a sad thing, but I think it's true, that a student is based, their intellectual capacity is based on the language they use, right? And they might have a degree in quantum physics back home, but if their English level is really low, that's what the native speaker is going to judge their intelligence on. I tell them, the more phrasal verbs they're using, the more idioms they're using, you know. I mean, it makes sense, right? If you've got somebody who's using language effectively, that's how they're going to be judged on. So that oftentimes inspires them to be using, not the date, but just the idea that people are looking at them on an equal plane of intelligence. Okay. All right. So good. So far, so good. All right. Good. So let's go into. I just have a couple questions for you here to think on for a couple minutes. We'll talk about those, and then we'll get into our mini lesson. So warm-up questions. You can, again, in your pairs or groups of 3. Why are triparts not taught as frequently as single word verb? Or if you do, then you can completely disagree and walk out. Okay. And then number 2, how can teaching triparts connect all the language skills together, which is kind of what we're here for. So let me give you a couple minutes on that, and then we'll exchange ideas.
Is that the reason they don't sometimes
Or you think that
it's
When you mix them up, they're probably such a
Okay! Sorry, when you get that energy, there's so much good energy in the room and all you guys were talking, the last thing I want to do is stop you guys. But I just looked at the clock and thought, shoot. So there's the first one about why, first of all, before we answer that question, how many of you teach either bi or triparts on a regular basis? Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. So the first one, why are triparts? Why are triparts not taught as frequently, do you think?
They're not in the grammar book.
We're not in the grammar book. This is a nice project for somebody. How many graduate students do we have in here? Okay, because it's a nice project. You can do what Coxhead did down in New Zealand and do instead of the academic word list, do how many times the triparts come up. I mean, my wife and I are working on a book for students, just triparts, which is more practical. It's not, a list. So, but I mean, every lecture that I've been to, or so many neuroscience books that I read all the time, there's a tripart per page. And those, they're not necessarily the watered down ones. They can be the sort of rigid, jargony ones, but they're still there. So yeah, they're not in the books.
Or in the curriculum description.
Or curriculum description.
It's like idioms. Wait till students are at a higher level to teach them those.
Right.
Because they've missed it the whole course of the time they've been taking classes.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, because they are causing confusion to students. They cause all ambiguity for the students to get it, and teachers want to move on. They want to finish the curriculum and they're not there.
Okay.
So they will try not to confuse it, to make it simple for them, so they will avoid it.
Okay. Yeah. One more, and then we'll.
Well, I think they're really easily confusable as well. Like, it's like look up, look around. There's just so many that have so many different meanings, and sometimes you have to have the object between, sometimes you have to have it at the end, sometimes it doesn't matter. So that there's just, it's so complicated.
Right. Okay.
As compared to, as opposed to create this project, come up with this idea, come up, with idea that, it's hard to see.
Oh, I'm listening. Okay. So come up with, yeah, so what I want to try to do, because I think that's chocolate. So I think that might be, well, I can't do that either. This is a crucial one here too. Sorry, I'm going to try to loop it back to that. Okay, good. So, yeah, I mean the idea that one, that causes confusion, and two, there's so many variations, right? So what I want to try to do in our little mini lesson is get to the feeling of the words. Because my personal philosophy is, I don't see a difference in teaching a single word, noun, verb, adjective, teaching an idiom. Larry has issues with my use of, and he should, okay, always have issues with me, because that's what makes the field go forward, right? But he has issues the way I determine idiom. I'm pretty broad. I mean, I use just about everything as an idiom. And I think he likes multi-word units, okay, which is great. Okay. But whatever it is, I always try to take the students back to when they're 2 years old. The mom doesn't say, look, here is a pear on the counter, memorize it, quiz tomorrow. Okay? There's a lot of things that go into this, okay? A lot of the senses. And unfortunately, I'm not going to go into that today, but I'm going to take a different perspective, but still the feeling of the words is really important, okay? So, real quickly, the second one, and this one's pretty easy because it's with all vocabulary, but how can teaching triparts kind of do the webbing that I've got on the front cover here? What's special about vocabulary that once you teach vocabulary, you're actually teaching everything? How does that work? Any quick answers? Yeah, okay. And let's do that right now. Okay, so go back. I should have picked a different language and then actually taught you something. But let's use English, okay? So on page, where's the mini lesson? Okay, on page 5, okay, you've got basically on your little sheet there that I put up on the board. So in class, I might have, okay, I'm not going to have this down there, but the little section here with the part of speech, verb, if, register, okay? The tripart and the examples, okay, and your example. So students would have 5 of those on a page, okay? And then I've got look forward to here. No definition, right? But we've got 2 examples. Stephanie, in the back, okay, looks forward to seeing Carlos after a long day at work. Okay. Carlos is her, what is he again?
Skink.
A skink.
Lizard.
Okay. Or Laura, in the back, doing the camera, is looking forward to the new readathon project. Now, I might give 5 or 6 more just quickly off the cuff, okay? And then you would give me the definition, which is to look forward to something. Okay, excited about, or yeah, I think anticipate is a nice. I mean, you can paraphrase, but I like anticipate with and that whole idea of great pleasure. Right? You really want to do something. Okay. But the whole idea, again, that just giving as many examples as possible so the students are eliciting the definition. You can carve that definition, but not give it to them. Okay. So then, we've got that. They've got the examples. Part of speech would be what? Yeah, a verb. Or you can do the, tripart phrasal verb if you want to do that, or if you want to do the idiom. The general idiom idea. I usually, when I give them an idiom, I tell them what kind. Like, is it an adjective clause type idiom, or is it a verb group? So they know how to use it. Verbity, it's not in the dictionary. Verb meaning word, feeling. So with those examples that I gave with Laura and Stephanie, does this verbity have a positive feel to you, a negative feel, or is there neutral? Yeah. Okay. And then, once you get into this, I'd ask the students, why is it a positive feel? And through that, they're already discussing, they're already using the phrase of the 90s critical thinking, right? I mean, we've done critical thinking since what? 10,000 BC? To sell more textbooks. Let's call it critical thinking. But the important part of the verbity isn't just to give it a positive, negative, or neutral label, but for the students to talk about it. Well, I think it's positive because of this. And I'll give you an example where it can get controversial. Drive one's point home. So I was doing an idiom once, and this gal from Switzerland, I asked the whole class, and I said, well, we think it's a positive because you're emphasizing it on this point you believe in. And she said, well, I think it's negative because if you'd have to emphasize it so much, it obviously wasn't important to begin with. And I thought, that's actually, I like that. Or be tied up. I mean, everyone gave it a negative. But I had a Chinese student who said, no, it's positive. If you're busy, it means you're out of trouble. And if you're out of trouble, you're probably making money. And if you're making money, that's a good thing. So what I'll have them actually do, too, on their paper is they can circle that, and then right off to the side, if they don't agree with what the majority of the class decided, they can make their little argument. Because I'm not, I'll give them a point for that, but it's not the point that matters. I want them to be thinking about it. And the whole idea is if that feeling of that word gets them to understand it at a deeper level, then whichever feeling it is, I'm pretty much fine with it. Okay. Now, if you say blissful, of course that's going to be positive. Genocide is going to be negative. But you've got a lot of ones in between, right? Okay. So register, I've got at the bottom there, if you're ever interested, Juice 1961. It's an old work, but it's really good because he talks about register as frozen, language that's frozen, formal, casual, and intimate, and he breaks it down nicely. But I might, and this gets kind of tricky too, I'd ask the students, okay, when do you think you'd use look forward to? Okay. Casual, On the other hand, what's that? Intimate too, right. On the other hand, just the other day I was reading a book, Linguistics, where they ended the chapter where we look forward to more research done on the specific point, okay? And again, $38 book off Amazon, okay? Academic book. And so I always tell them that formal, informal is really difficult in English because given a formal speech, okay, in the example segment, you're going to put a tripart probably. Now, if you're writing a chemistry lab up, you're probably not going to use, we fell back on, although it might be possible, we fell back on our earlier experiments to look at that. So it's really hard. But at least they get, again, they're thinking how these things are being used. Okay? Situation, that one's more, would you see it, in the situation of a newspaper? Would it be in a public speech? Okay? Would it be used in a lecture? Would it be used in the lab lecture? Would it be used on a date, with the student using the tripart phrasal verbs and getting date number 2? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, I did have a Saudi student that told me, he said, my girlfriend was impressed that I knew look up to, because I used to. Okay. So I'm pretty sure he got date number 2. Coffee date. Don't let the mind go. All right, so gesture, this is really, really important. And I know you, again, you're thinking this takes a lot of time. So the caveat is, I'll give it to you now. Yeah, these might be in my class, but this is something I've developed over time. So I would just pick 1 or 2 of these to start out with, and then gradually work them in. But I'll give you a really good example of gesture. 2 years ago, when I had taught let up on, I did the example of, letting up on the gas when you see the policeman, right? But I used the foot gesture and the hand gesture, okay? And then 2 weeks later, wahab, okay? One of our students, he was sitting during the quiz like this, and it led up to was one of the questions, and I remember his eyes looking like this, and then he put his foot on the floor and lit up, and then he went, I remember that, look, and I thought, it gave me goosebumps. And after that, I started noticing my students sitting in their desks doing the gestures that we had used for which goes back to your question about, just that idea of, like, if we take these 2, which can be, I don't like some of these systems that say, teach, look up to, look in on, look forward to, and, all at once. It's ridiculous. But if we just if we just use these 2, for example, the students, I teach them always at different times. This might be week 1, and this is week 3. But in week 4, they might get confused. But we'll talk about the whole idea that look up to is what?
Respect.
Yeah, respect or admire. And remember, if you went to the private education and you studied under the British system, you had to learn Latin, right? Okay, or even if you didn't. Okay. So admire is just look, right? And the ad means to. So admire from the etymology is to look, right? So if you look at it in a fond way, it's that whole idea of looking up to, okay, as opposed to looking forward to. But that's where the gestures come in again, right? Looking up to and looking forward to, right? And you think about it as well, this is where the brain comes in. Okay? I mean, how as a civilization did we evolve all these years? It was through walking and balance, right? And that's how the brain developed. We weren't sitting down at a computer, but we were walking, right? The women were gathering, the men were hunting, okay? And so thinking on your feet and thinking with gestures, it's just a natural part of learning. So any vocabulary that I'll teach, and sometimes it can be hard, like concise, right? I mean, you have an abstract term like that, but you can just do the simple thing of, expressing a lot, in a few words, and just getting that whole idea. When they see that gesture with, whether it's a phrasal verb or a regular word, suddenly that abstraction becomes a little more concrete, okay? And they can visualize that. I mean, gestures are really, it's another form of language. It's showing certain aspects that language doesn't necessarily have. So, all right. What about emotion? The easiest one. Then they'll give us 15 minutes for games. Last one. So emotion, so with this one, at the beginning of the term, I usually go through just with the students so that we're on the same page. So what do we have? Happy, sad, disgust, fear, anger, okay. Surprise, is that it? Are those 6? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah, okay. So, and then all the other emotions are a variation of those, right? So with this one, what emotion would we have? Look forward to.
Happy.
Yeah, happy or
Could be surprised.
could be surprised, right? A pleasant surprise, okay? And then variations of that. And I like doing the emotion part, again, because anytime that you're eliciting, I was actually going to bring a tape recorder, not a tape recorder. How old I am. I walk across campus sometimes with this little boom box for music for class. People laugh at me. It's like, but I know it works. When I plug it in, it's going to work. So, there's the whole idea, you've heard about, right opposite, okay, this is supposed to be the brain, right? Okay. Right off the hippocampus, you've got the amygdala, right? The center for, they're thinking that a lot of our emotional memories are lodged in there. They're not certain, but there's a lot of evidence now that's pointing in that direction. So my question is, if you're, whatever emotional, you can't make everything an emotional experience, maybe, but what if you can? What if you can tie emotion to learning? Your students are going to remember a heck of a lot more. So that's where I'll get them to, okay, what emotion do you have with this? And again, they just don't say happy or blissful or walking on airness, but they'll give a reason why, okay? And again, that discussion of talking about it is going to help them learn. And what did Mr. Nation say? Good old Paul from New Zealand, he said something like, within a limited amount of time, within the hour, we have to hear the word at least 15 times. Well, for me, it's more, because I'm 48. My daughter can hear it once or twice, and she's fine. But within that hour of the students saying that, I think look forward to means this because of that, the students are hearing that look forward to a lot. So it goes back to the whole idea of feeling, where by the end of that segment, they're feeling the word a lot more than it's just a word. It becomes that person's word. Okay? Good? So my question is, at the bottom of the page, it says a follow-up question. How many skills are used in this simple mini lesson? Did you do any reading? Yes. Yeah. So the R is there. Did you do any thinking? Yes. Yeah. Do any speaking? Yes. Do any listening? Yes. Do any error correction? Well, on the back, in the appendices for you, on the very last page, I'll just refer to that now, and then I'll let it go. The top part, one little activity that I have my students do is attend lectures at Western, and then they take notes in the class, but I also want them to listen to phrasal verbs. And this is a list of phrasal verbs throughout the past 2 years that they've come back to saying the professors use a lot of them, okay, in class. I'm sorry, I didn't put down if it was the MBA program or whatever. And then Appendix B, these are just frequent errors. So Iman is up against that work. They want to leave the object out. Okay. So a lot of times we'll do the error correction. We didn't really get to that here. What about writing? Did any of you write the example sentence? Oh, okay, there you go. Grammar? Okay. With this one, it's kind of a neat one too, because you can always talk about the noun phrase, business. Okay. You can either look forward to the movie or seeing the movie. So they know that you're either going to use a simple noun or the gerund form. Keep it on a noun phrase. So there's a lot of grammar that can go into that too. Okay. What is LAF? It's not computer language talk. Oh, there you go, laughing and fun, yeah. Did you do that? Yeah, okay. I've just got language feeling. Language feeling or intuition. Okay, so feeling the language. All right. So, I think this presentation is about triparts, but I think just about any vocabulary that you use, you can pull in all of those things if you teach it in a similar manner. Pair up, pair up is good. Okay. What I'd like you to do, and the fastest team gets the chocolate, so be prepared, okay? What we're going to do, so on page 6, just look at number 1 for right now. What I'd like you to do is, Judith, could you compare? Okay. So we're a pair. Well, I'm married. I'm just using that. I don't think that way. So if we're partners, I'm going to give you, 1 minute or so, and I'm going to give you a definition, okay? So I'm going to say, if you look at that, I'm going to say, convince somebody not to do something. And so you
Talk out.
Okay, good. Okay. Encounter a really difficult problem.
Come up against.
Okay. You got it? So I want you to give the full definition. Okay? And then your partner, once they tag it and you're all done with those, raise your hand. Good? Okay? Everybody got a partner? Okay, go! We have the winners over here. So, do you see a possible problem with this? Yeah. Which is what? Oh, more examples. Oh, okay, good. Well, that'd be okay. I mean, as long as they're trying to get the meaning out there. Okay. One thing, and then I recommend doing this in threes, like I'm having you do it now, because the second one is, and now we'll do the same thing, but this time I just want you to give a one-word definition. Okay? So instead of fall back on, as maybe you said, when you use something to support you, just go to defend or support. Okay? Good? So I'll give you 30 seconds again. Well, a minute. Go! All right. So, you got the definition the first time, and then just the word the second time, right? Okay. Now, unfortunately, we won't have time, so I want to go through a couple others. The third one I usually do is a gesture. Okay. And those can be a little difficult, but again, what it's doing, it's forcing the brain, to think and to predict, and a lot of times what I'll do, just a parenthetical on the gestures too, is what I've found is if the students like the gesture that I help them with when we're learning a vocabulary term, they'll keep that, because it probably has some emotional tie to them. But if it's completely foreign to them, then I always prefer that they come up with something on their own. So, like the concise, they seem to like that one, or coherent. I'll see them doing that. But if they've got their own, that's completely fine. So, another one. If you'll turn to page 7, this one I like a lot. There's nothing really new here, but it's just a tri-part interview. So I'll get the students to go out and try not to get other faculty, but their friends, native speaker undergrads or grads. So number 1, do you know what look up to means? Can you give me a definition? How often do you use it? Do you think it's an important term to know and know how to use? Where do you use it? Or try to use the look up to? And then is there a one-word equivalent of look up to? Okay. So when they're doing this, the reason why it's a selfish assignment, because I want the students to see that the tri-parts that I'm giving them, there's validity to it. Okay? Because they might think, well, where did you, remember I had a student a couple terms ago and he said, where did you get these terms anyway? Because he didn't do well in the quiz, right? And I said, well, these happen to come out the 2013 TOEFL. Oh, really? and then suddenly it knows all the difference. But a lot of them that I'll pull from, all these tri-parts, the ones that are on the back of that list, interesting enough too, they're always in the paper-based TOEFL guide that they've got a lot of the tri-parts in there. So this just gives it a little validity. Oh, wow, okay, these are important for me to study. Okay, and then, can we go to page 9 real quick? Because that one you can just read about. This is a real effective one, and if you want, I can actually email you some student examples. But tell me about the personality of your word. What I'll do is I'll have the students brainstorm, look up to, and this goes back to your point earlier, look forward to now becomes a person, okay? And maybe the one student wrote this look forward to is a 13-year-old Japanese student, and every morning she bends down in her bed and holds a picture of her parents up. And she gives a little prayer. And then she looks up at the sky and says, thank you for these friends. This is look up to, and then they write this little paragraph about look up to, okay? Now you can make that a little longer and just do like a personality introduction in the first paragraph, and then go into maybe a problem solution paragraph, so you can kind of expand it how you want it. But I'll use a quote from an Iraqi student that I had 2 years ago, and I really like it. He said, once we did this activity, he said, how in the world do you ever expect us to forget these words? Which I thought was interesting. Why do you want to forget them anyway? But he said, how in the world, or the quote was, how in the world do you expect us to ever forget these words when they become our friends? Okay. And a lot of them were abstract, and that's why I tried to use this activity to take that abstractness out and make it a little more concrete. But if you just go to this website, and I'm going to try to post a new one up there tonight or tomorrow, or if you just go to the recent TESOL Connections, there's a little description of how it's kind of a day by day, what you can do in day 1, day 2, and day 3 for this. Because you can either launch right into it with a brainstorm, but what I'd like to do is just have the students talk about it first before they write. Like, Mr. Meticulous, what would he be, or Miss Meticulous, okay? Or Miss look forward to, okay? So, and then maybe the second lesson you can have them write about it. Okay? Kind of similar, if we go backwards, do you see where it says interview a tripart? Okay, I mean, this idea came from, elementary schools use a lot of interview the word. Heard about? So, it's just based on that, where you've got the reporter. Where do you like to hang out? Come up with? Oh, I really like ESL classrooms the best. You got the reporter that comes up with a list of questions, and then it's ad lib as you can for whatever tripart it is, and they just kind of give back. But again, it gets them into that feeling the word. Okay, where would I hang out? What are my favorite friends? Well, come up with, I'd probably like look back on, or maybe think about cut down on things, thinking about reducing a bad habit, I don't know. Okay. So it gets them spinning, okay? And then the last 2 activities going up, it's just the discussions, and these are, I've got intermediate and advanced, but that was just because I had an intermediate group, remember last fall, Joseph, with a lot of Brazilians, and they're intermediate, but their level was way up here, okay? You can maybe take that intermediate out and just put advanced, or just alter it. But what it is like the first one up there, where it says assign students to look up 5 to 6 triparts and note how they're used, okay? And then when they bring them to class, they'll just have a discussion, like that book that I told you about, where they were right on the first page, okay? They'd probably use look in on, you want to look in on, because again, it's a little more informal, and it was an informal book on nursery rhymes. Okay? So they'll look at the formality, the informality, why they wouldn't use create or invent as opposed to come up with. So again, it gets them discussing. But I've used it mainly in advanced, except for that one intermediate group that was kind of advanced. So, any questions on any of the things? Looks like we're almost out of time. No questions? Yeah. Like, one question could be, is there any more chocolate? Yeah. Oh. Yeah, I don't know, because the thing is that how this came out, this infatuation with triparts, it was from my students that would come back when I was teaching over in the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. And they'd sit there and they'd say, some of the idioms, the same thing. They'll fixate on it. So they'll be listening to the lecture, and fall back on. It's like, fall, what? Fall back on what? What? And then they fixate on that for maybe only 10 or 20 seconds. That's 10 to 20 seconds of the lecture that is now, and you know, they didn't tape them all back then. I don't know that many students who do it now as well. But so there's those little hurdles, and then they'll fixate on that tripart or idiom. Okay, and so that's what got me motivated to start listening to it. And if you go, I mean, remember last year? Didn't everybody came here last year for the woman who talked about, you know, the tomb robbing. Okay, and I remember Joseph was laughing at me. I didn't pay attention. But he's sitting there paying attention to the lecture, and I'm writing down all the idioms and phrasal verbs. He's like, what are you doing? Pay attention. But I mean, I counted 142 that she had used. I mean, and a lot of them were repeated. Remember, she used, we were walking hand in hand with the Egyptian government. She talked a lot about, and she used look back on and look back at a lot. Okay, so some of those were repeated, but still, I mean, it was about an hour lecture, right? And that many. And the man down in Alabama who's studying idioms, and he uses it kind of loosely too, so phrasal verbs, talks about the average college student using anywhere from 3 to 4 a minute. You know, either phrasal verbs or. So, and I always get that idea too that maybe it's wrong, and I could be wrong, completely wrong, but my idea is in teaching the students just the academic word list, their life isn't just academic, that they've got a whole life out there that they can embrace while they're here. And so I try to give them, during the course of the term, I'll give them, which might be for some completely meaningless idioms, okay, like a fish out of water, and then when they see it on the news, they get all excited. And then, you know, the academic ones to keep them at bay, okay? And then a lot of phrasal verbs. So I try to give them a wide gamut of terms during the course of the semester. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's one thing is like Paul and I in our idioms book that we're working on, or worked on, we're hoping that more textbooks will start at least using like conversation analysis, because like the lady this morning that put up the dialogue that was very stilted. If there could be more conversation analysis type of discussions, like, oh, did you see? Oh, yeah, you know, a conversation like that. But then, okay, what did the students see? Well, given the dialogue before that, maybe they're talking about A and B. So more realistic. But that's kind of. I know the textbook companies. I mean, anybody with good ideas. Now's a good time because a lot of those companies, from what I hear at TESOL, they're running out of ideas. Okay? They want a new wave, and I think our profession, the most beautiful thing about it is it's very old, and we can sit back and just kind of do what we've always been doing, but there's so much room, I think, to expand and do a lot of great things. And yeah, TESOL Press is like, we've run out of ideas. Do you have any ideas? And I say, if you're paying me. I mean, that idiom book we wrote for them, we don't get any royalties, right? But our royalties is people getting it and using it and moving forward with it. Well, thank you.